Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Indexer Office Hours. Today is the 11th of July, and this is Indexer Office Hours 115. If anyone is new to Indexer Office Hours, and I recognize a few new faces, this is the town hall where indexers come together and to discuss the most important and relevant topics as it relates to the index community. As always, this is a reminder that this session is recorded and distributed onto public channels like YouTube, so please bear that in mind if you're concerned about privacy. This is a conversation. We love participation, so you can get involved either via text or via voice, or a sound effect if you so desire. And with that, let's get into today's exciting agenda. So I'm going to kick off with opening remarks, but this one is a special one because the 𝗨𝗂𝗧𝗂𝗧 episode that we had this week is with Anna, who's currently with us on today's course. So I usually give a little bit of a shout out and say a few words about the 𝗨𝗂𝗧𝗂𝗧 episode. So I'm going to do something a bit different and maybe hand it over to Anna so she can share some words about her episode with Nick, who's also here as well.
Thank you, Abel. And I won't lie, I am nervous to talk about this. But my episode is mostly about sort of how I stumbled in the technical space and then how I ended up in the graph community and Web3, but also about like views on education, very controversial, as well as moving through a lot of countries, like 3 countries and 2 continents. Yeah, if you're interested, listen to it. I try to be as open as possible, and no wonder I feel a bit of exposed because it's quite a vulnerable piece of me that I don't normally share with the external community. But yeah, give it a listen if you want.
Indeed. And we have the link there in the chat for those who want to go check it out. And yes, thank you so much, Juan, for posting the full agenda. Yeah, I'm going to hand it actually straight back to Anna, who's going to take us into our regularly scheduled Repo Watch section.
Hello, it's me again. Okay, so this week on Repo Watch, we have a new release of 𝗨𝗪𝗪 Ethereum. This is version 1.4.8. This adds readiness check for the auth provider when answering health endpoint on Firehose and Substream, fixes a bug in Substreams Tier 1 and Substreams Tier 2, which caused live blocks to be sent while the streams previously received blocks that were historic. And it also changes Substream Tier 1 debug request stats to Substreams Tier 1 request stats, so without debug, which enables request stats logging on Substreams Tier 1. Similarly, Substream Tier 2 debug request stats has been changed to Substreams Tier 2 request stats. And that's all we have on the 𝗨𝗪𝗪𝗪 Ethereum. Let us know if you've tried it. Moving on to Avalanche. Here we have a new release, version 1.10.4. This adds staking host CLI option to allow binding only on specific addresses for staking. Adds checksums enabled to the X-chain and P-chain config, and fixes proposer VM pre-fork status method response after the fork has occurred. MerkleDB fix next key when an empty end of proof is provided. Fixes Docker execution on non-AMD 64 architectures, and removes a list of API all to do with Avalanche X VM, Avalanche Meter VM, and you will find the whole list of them on the agenda. This release is backwards compatible with version 1.10.0. It is optional but encouraged, and the supported plugin for this version is still 26. And that's all and then we have a new release from Arbitrum Nitro. This is version 2.1.0 beta 7. This adds separate test nodes. It fixes miscellaneous L3 timing. It adds supports for consensus version 10.2 to Dockerfile. It rejects RPC requests if memory limits are exceeded. And on recording DB, it adds configs, metrics, and size limits. It also updates Go Ethereum to fork version 1.11.5 and adds maintenance log to sequencers. And we also have that's all we have this week. Let us know if you've tried any of the new releases or if there are any comments. Otherwise, handing over to you, Juan.
Thanks, Anna. So for Protocol Watch, we don't really have a lot to cover, so I'll be brief. Forum governance, we don't have new updates since @IOH. Forum research, as always, in the early parts of the month, we always have the updates for all of the core developers. We had the Edge node the last week, and we have all of the other ones this week. This includes the Guild, GraphOps, Semiotic Labs, Messari, StreamingFast, as well as Geo, which also adds some updates for July 2023. So if you're interested in any of those, again, those are lengthy. So if you're interested in any of the core developers, you can see the links in the agenda. So that's basically it. Next up in forum research, we do have a small inquiry about like subgraph being syncing too slowly. Again, those are like just questions that happen. I want to cover it here. Again, if your subgraph is syncing slowly and you're deployed to hosted, it could be many things like subgraph optimization issues, as well as issues on hosted service itself. But again, as Derek is pointing out, 2 hours too slow on BSC. Yeah, it's not slow for BSC. There's a lot of data in BSC. So that's basically what you would expect on a small subgraph for Binance. But that's pretty much it. Regarding contract suppository, there are no new updates. Basically, all of the contract team is working on the auto transfer tool testing and making sure that everything's work correctly. Again, we discussed L2 transfer tools last week, but they are basically pretty much done. We're just figuring out the last few steps in integration and figuring out the rollout procedures for production testnet, which is mostly done, as well as for mainnet. So anytime now we will have them live. I can't promise on a date, but hopefully it's really soon. For the network subgraphs, again, we don't have any new releases as we're waiting on the huge release for the L2 transfer tools. Once that's released on mainnet, we will cover it here. And that's pretty much it for Protocol Watch. So I'll hand it over to Abel now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now I would like to hand it over to Derek, who has a shout out for Build a DAO.
Thank you, Abel. So just a quick shout out. I'm sure a lot of people have heard, potentially of Builders DAO or previously of Subgraph DAO. It was rebranded just to make it more data service agnostic, because the DAO will build substreams and all the multitude of services that we release in the world of data services, as we've previously discussed. But some great news. For the past year, it's been a little bit stuck in like legal land and getting things up and running and all that jazz. We have now officially reached the point where the DAO exists and where we're doing our official Hello World. There's going to be a Twitter space on Thursday where we start going through what is the DAO, what do we do, what service do we provide, who would be good DAO members, who could leverage the DAO in some way just as a protocol, more as a customer or client of the DAO, and all that good stuff. So I'm going to drop a link in the chat. And if you guys want to join the Twitter space, you're more than welcome to. If you have any questions or want to get involved in the DAO in any way, feel free to reach out to me. But yeah, we're really excited to get this thing off the ground, and we already have a few projects that the DAO is servicing, and so it's cool to see some traction moving. Thank you. And with that, I'll pass it back to 𝗨𝗀𝗂𝗧.
Oh shit! I hit the wrong one. I meant to do the horn, but okay. Here we go. Clap, air horn. Congratulations, that's big news. Yeah, Discord broke today, indeed. Yeah, that's huge news. That's really, really cool. And I definitely encourage all of you to go check out the Twitter space over there. Thank you so much for the shout out there, Derek. Cool. So I would say, so for today, I have a few things that I want to cover with you guys. First is an ask. So currently in the process of scheduling out some workshops, chats, fireside chats, things of this nature for IOH for the coming weeks. And so I would like to garner some feedback and thoughts from the community in terms of like what you guys would like to hear. So are there any topics in general that people have been, wanting to have covered in IOH but haven't been covered yet? I know that one of them is a streaming fast AMA, potentially with Alex. I know that a lot of people have a lot of questions in relation to fire hose, substreams, that kind of stuff. So we can get a hold of Alex and try to do that. But I want to, have like an open call and ask if there are any things people want to hear. Either you can add them in the chat or just unmute your mic and we can get that conversation started. So are there any things that people have in mind?
Well, actually, I would love to have someone from Streaming Fast, but not necessarily Alex. Someone that's more closer to the community and also technical would be nicer. So we can chit chat about like how to set up the fire hose and stuff like that. Like Alex is way too much of a big brain for us to waste his time speaking about like how to set up fire hose. And well, we already talked about that with Matthew from Pinex, but I guess we can chat about the ins and outs and everything. But yeah.
Amazing. That's really useful. I'm sure we can think about someone who could be a good fit in that respect, that we can bring along. So I appreciate it. That's very good, specific request. I appreciate that.
So maybe besides Alex, just get some like one or two more from Streaming Fast, because we never had a session with more than one guy from Streaming Fast, if I recall correctly. Yeah, there you go.
We've had
Stefan or Matt.
few. Yeah, Stefan and Matt could definitely be a good shout. I will reach out to those folks. Awesome. Anything else that people are thinking? I could see a comment here from Vincent saying we're getting. Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, so I'm guessing that would be useful for Data Nexus too as well. Great. Anything else that people are thinking about in terms of topics that could be interesting?
Self-hosting.
Yeah, we can do that. Who would you have in mind that could be a good fit for that? Or
me in 1 month from now. I can tell you that much.
Cool. Well, I will coordinate with you to get that sorted. Cool. I just wrote that down. Appreciate that. Consider it scheduled. Yeah. Definitely keen to hear more about your Slack pane. I think a lot of us could learn from you, so I think it'd be useful. Anything else?
I have a question regarding migration to Arbitrum. Well, I've noticed that on Explorer, some indexers have managed to create a name without ENS, or maybe even using ENS on Arbitrum. I actually wondering how they do it. I've seen that Protofire has asked these questions, but I don't think that it was properly answered.
So if you own the ENS name on Ethereum with the same address that you are running your indexer on Arbitrum, it will be auto-populated, but only if it's just the whole domain and not a subdomain ENS name. Does that answer your question?
And if it's different multisigs, I've noticed that, for example, a 𝗨𝗏 using different multisigs for both.
Good
versions.
question. I don't know.
Well, in the first option, we have is a token lock contract, and in the second option, it's a multisig, well, an Arbitrum.
If you execute the same byte code when deploying the multisig, you will be able to get a multisig on a different chain with the same address. And what you might notice is that if two people have, or like if somebody has two different multisigs with different addresses, their ENS name might be slightly different. So they are just registering their main ENS name, and then they are registering a slightly different one that they use on a separate address. So with that answer your question, so you can execute the exact same bytecode. Like you can look at the contract deployment of your Arbitrum multisig, and then you can execute the same bytecode on the Gnosis mainnet contract, or the Gnosis Safe mainnet contract, to get the exact same address also on Ethereum mainnet. And then you can use a similar ENS name on that address to get a name in the Explorer.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also noticed guys from Data Nexus have put it links. So yeah, thank you very much.
Amazing. Hopefully that answers your question. Thank you so much for responding, guys, and posting the link here. Yeah, I mean, the next agenda item I had is just like a general kind of like, well, I wanted to do two things. I wanted to also solicit some feedback on general kind of ways that we can improve IOH going forward as well as like a general open discussion. So we can do either or. We can do them together. It's kind of, I don't have a strong opinion either way. So we can either, do that, or continue soliciting topics for future IOHs, like easy on how we do this.
I feel like we should somehow separate IOH in the form of that we have now to the one that we have like people coming over and doing presentations, because I feel like this is the actual IOH that we started 3 years ago, and it's more closer to the roots where people can just come in and ask their questions, and if they don't have questions, we just come up with the topic, and if we run out of topics, we just kill this week's IOH. But like, I also see the benefit of having the presentations and everything, but I feel like they might need to be called something else. It's still indexers something, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just my opinion. I'm curious of your all thoughts.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt someone?
No, I can continue Payne's statement. I wanted another subject.
Awesome. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think how I'm thinking about it is that we still have kind of IOH as the branding, just so it doesn't confuse people. But then, when there's a specific person coming on to do a specific like AMA or a presentation and stuff like that, then there's like more of like a hey everyone, we're promoting that there's someone coming, and if you have any specific questions about these things, like come along. Otherwise, every week we know that there's going to be like a hangout where people just come and share topics, ideas, questions, just like Anton just did now. He had a question, and many of you amazing people answered it, and he's unblocked now, so stuff like that. So yeah, index of drinking hours long. Yeah, something to that effect. Yeah, that's good to know, and I definitely agree that there's like a difference in the two types, and I think there's value in both for sure, and we should keep doing both.
Well, not regarding probably next Indexer office hours, but the meeting after that. Basically, we are at P2P right now working on including curators APR. So basically, this Christmas and New Year, maybe some of you noticed that we have made a dashboard for curators where they can basically track what APR do they get from query fees, just in order to make this like branch of our network more attractive, because I think many people just do not understand how valuable it is to be a curator, because it's a bit ambiguous how much rewards do you get and what is the actual APR you're getting. So for example, sometimes from some query fees the APR is even over 100%. And so basically right now we're doing this thing for Arbitrum network, and I guess in a week or two we'll be ready to present it. Of course, it's indexer office hours, not curators office hours, but I guess if you're interested in stuff like that, well, I can present. At least I think almost everyone is interested at how we calculate this APR, just because it's relatively hard.
Yeah, I believe that there is some work being done on the curation markets, but yeah, I think it could make a lot of sense. I will ping you one-to-one DM, and maybe we could talk more and see what we can do in that respect, because yeah, maybe there could be something there. I see another thing here from Mickey. Hey Mickey, what's up? Saying that Edgenode is hosting IPFS for the ecosystem. Edgenode hosting IPFS for the ecosystem is a centralized point of failure. Are you guys interested in discussing how to decentralize this across multiple indexers? Has this already been discussed previously? Interesting. I don't think that's been discussed. Yeah. What is the general appetite for stuff like this? I'm also curious as well.
It's got 7 heart on fire.
That is a fair few, which yeah, indicates that there's some interest here. So maybe yeah, I'll hit you up, Mickey, and see if we can get something like that on the calendar. Awesome, good stuff. Let's see. On that point, we discussions from the core dev. Oh, that could be interesting. We have not had an open discussion about dips in the core dev call. We can actually have that open discussion now. So do you have any specific thoughts there that you wanted to share with the rest of the group, and then maybe you can spark a discussion there, Derek?
Oh, absolutely.
Amazing.
So part of the, if I'm understanding the core devs call accurately, DIPS is kind of a research into figuring out better ways to curate subgraphs on the decentralized network, where consumers can essentially state that they want to pay an indexer X amount in order to sync their subgraph, right? Some of the mechanics and how that happens, I don't think that's been fully worked out. But essentially, you could get paid just for syncing the subgraph exterior to query fees. And there's been talks about looking at that as a curation mechanism. And I forget which core devs call it was on, but ultimately they talked about having this replace the existing curation system. and then moving the overall token emissions or the indexer rewards to being just flat across all subgraphs. So regardless of how much signal something has, you're just getting a set emission rate on your stake. I know I personally have a lot of concerns with that type of a methodology, and I would like to make those concerns known kind of before we get into the the building of all that type of stuff. But ultimately, I think the future that results in is where indexers are placing a majority of their stake on very simple subgraphs that have a couple of entities, and if your database corrupts mid an allocation lifespan, you can easily resync it in 2 to 3 minutes. That may or may not have a bunch of query volume, and then only allocating their stake to productive subgraphs proportionate to what they expect to get in query fees. Especially with, what is it, GIP 51, the exponential query fee rebates. If your stake just has to be 10 times the amount of query fees that you expect, on our end, we've had a couple of allocations of 10,000 plus query fees, but that was largely when other indexers weren't on the same subgraph, and we had like a volume spike. But for the most part, anything that's producing 1,000 or 2,000 GRT in query fees, that's kind of like a pretty core producer. But we're not really, at least currently, expecting anything much higher than that. So our strategy would largely be take 20,000 GRT on every allocation for anything that's producing query fees, and then dump all the rest of it on something that's not productive or not really necessary. And I don't know that that's totally a bad thing, but it's just something that I think we should be aware of if we want to change it. I expect that would be the behavior that a lot of people start doing.
Very
Thoughts on that?
interested to, yeah, very interested to hear people's thoughts on that. Yeah, I was going to say not to call on anyone specific, but I'm always curious to hear Jim's perspective on these things. That is true. I agree. Having Zach here could be beneficial. Maybe, and Chris as well. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe, if anyone here has any specific thoughts, we can discuss this now. But if not, then we can take this conversation and maybe have it at a time where Chris and Zach are here. Oh, I see you unmuted, Jim.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, I don't know if it's related, and I haven't really thought through it that much myself. I haven't had the time to, but one of the things that bothers me a lot about the network, and anyone who's in the Graphtronauts channel will know that I've kind of taken the training wheels off, and I'm being a bit more controversial with what I say sometimes. I'm kind of tired of the rent seeking that I see in the network, where there are very large indexers that are returning very little value. It's a situation of you just have to watch their actions. Don't listen to what they say, look at their actions, and it tells you everything you need to know. Derek, do you have any thoughts on whether direct indexer payments might have an impact on that dynamic? Because that's the type of stuff I'm really interested in right now. What things can we do to the incentives dynamics in the network to more incentivize big players to return the value or some of the value that they're getting from the network? Because at the moment, some of these indexers are making tens of thousands of dollars. Some might be making more than that per month if they wanted to sell the GRT. And, they're not returning even anything remotely that sort of value to the network. So it's all just free money to them. Is there anything anyone's thinking about, or does direct indexer payments change that dynamic in any way? Could it actually make it worse?
I think without a doubt it would make it worse, because your income from indexer rewards is no longer proportional to what's available based off of a curation market. Instead, you can put all 100 million, or the totality of your stake on a single subgraph and earn an average yield, right? Whereas right now you couldn't do that. There's no subgraph that would sustain 100 million allocation. And so not only from big indexers, but also from smaller indexers that may not be focused on the productivity of the network, they could equally just index that one subgraph that has a single entity and it's only indexing one event, and still make an average yield compared to some of the rest of us here that are obviously working on fine-tuning our configurations and trying to help grow the network. And so I think there's a lot of challenges that having a average emission rate spread across all allocations, I think that could be introduced by that. So I think those are things that should be well confronted before we go too far on any of those. Although I will say on the GIP51, the exponential query fee rebates for indexers, if it is true that you only need to place a 20K allocation in order to claim up to 2,000 GRT in query fees, I think it's likely that we'll start seeing a behavior where more people will want to allocate to any subgraph that is actively producing query fees. Not from an indexer reward perspective, but they might just put a tiny allocation because it could produce query fees. We started to do that even with the 𝗨𝗪𝗪 implementation. We were using 500,000 GRT allocations on any subgraph that was kind of dominant in the query fee space. But being able to do that with just 20,000, that means that we'll be able to place an allocation on literally everything that's producing queries, and I suspect that we'll see other indexers doing kind of a similar thing.
Yeah, that sounds, half of the conversation sounds like a healthy dynamic that we want to promote, right? As much support for as many subgraphs as possible from as many indexers as possible. But the downsides sound like too much. I think it would be really great to have an official sort of GIP discussion on IOH where we have people like Zach, Chris. I know Marc-André's got a lot of thoughts on this. Anyone who's shared opinion on the actual forum post, it would be great for this to be like dedicate a half hour or something to, to start debating this or discussing it and understanding as well a bit more about what's the thought process behind making this change or these changes.
And I should clarify that the exponential query fee rebates, that's a separate GIP to what dips would be. So those, I was just thinking about those two in combination could make for a really huge dynamic shift inside of our network. Although the two individually, can be viewed from a very different lens. In combination, it does change how we would operate quite a bit. The one other point worth mentioning on GIP 51, with the whole concept of placing 20K allocations on anything that is productive, it is also possible that the economics of the subgraph change once you start having 100 indexers on a single subgraph. If queries get split between 100 people, it might once again not be worth it to claim any query fees because you're only getting 1/100th of whatever the subgraph is producing. And so, yeah, it's just that gets to be kind of an interesting thing to calculate.
I'm just seeing some of the chat in the text box here. Seems like Payne's responding to it.
Yeah, Vince, the flat rate for being allocated, that's essentially what DIPS is looking at doing. So regardless, like if you put 1 million on one subgraph or you put 100,000 on 10 subgraphs, you'd be earning the exact same emission. There is no signal that controls levers in that system. And I don't know, just responding to Anton's question, I don't know if it would be an under the table deal or if that gets broadcasted to the network and then claimed by someone. I don't think we've gotten specifics on how an indexer will, come to that marketplace and sync for payment.
Yeah, it's just that, well, at least the current version, at least how I saw it. For example, we have Messari guys, and they might make a deal with, let's say, one indexer and make direct payments to that one indexer from their ton of subgraphs, and basically this, let's call it Messari's favorite indexer, will kind of dominate the network. Well, obviously, the current description of this proposal is very shady and clear. I do not understand it into the full extent, but at least that's my main concern.
It would need to be an open market, right, Anton? It would need to be an open market for services rather than. That's what it would need to promote. Ultimately, it couldn't enable under the table deals as much as you can't enable these things, or you can try to not enable these things. It would need to be an open market. I don't see how else it could be a sort of neutral platform, right? Otherwise, you're sort of just building the same thing again with more steps.
Well, yeah, kind of looks like that. So basically, what this market will be an auction. Basically, we already have an auction on query fees, just with this curation stuff that kind of interrupts this whole process. But still, what can we suggest except for an auction? Basically, if we will speak about like a normal B2B world outside of crypto, like in real circumstances, basically it's almost the package deals. So quite often you do not only provide, let's say, an indexer service, but you also provide additionally RPC nodes. Additionally, you provide some, for example, other networks if you speak about crypto. And this way, again, kind of the big guys kind of have more opportunities than small solo indexers. Just from these under the table deals kind of points. So yes, it's obviously should be some kind of an open market with auction or something like that.
Whoever's bigger than me, Mickey. Just kidding.
I would say,
go ahead.
Go for it, Jim.
I would, for me, there's this dashboard that 𝗨𝗀𝗃𝗀 from Maple Nodes created for me a while back. I'd have to go looking for the link. It's like a KPI dashboard for indexers, and it includes things like, like total stake as a percentage of the network, and like how are you performing in terms of claimed vouchers, for query fees versus the rebates that you get. It's quite an eye-opening dashboard, and I tend to think that when I'm thinking about defining an indexer as a big indexer, I'm thinking of indexers that have a very large personal stake or the self stake, as well as an extremely large delegation, because they've obviously got the capacity to do that, to have that large delegation. So we're talking about indexers that are, in the 5, 6, 7% of the total network stake when I think of large indexers. And again, I am not painting the entire set of my definition of big indexers as rent seekers. I've said it before, I'll say it again. P2P are clearly signaling correctly as the biggest indexer. They run a ton of free queries across all their pillar indexers. That's a very clear signal that they support the network. But there are other indexers that don't do that, that are very big, but they only have, small number of subgraphs allocated to. So they're allocating tens of millions to single subgraphs. So that's kind of the way I think about it. I don't know if it's the right way to think about it. I'd be interested to hear if other people think of indexer size in different ways.
I think the dynamic will change when we move to Arbitrum, because it will cost you nothing to allocate to 5,000 subgraphs. So I don't see... And also this will drive other people to allocate to multiple subgraphs. So it essentially balances out the network more evenly and faster than it does on mainnet. So
it will be less socially acceptable, is what I would say, to have 17 allocations, let's say.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for a big indexer, yes. For a small indexer, I would still see, like, the disk space still costs quite a lot. So I don't see how, like, 100K indexer would allocate to 100 subgraphs. But for big indexers, yeah. Well, Anton, you can easily sync all the subgraphs right now in existence for below 20 terabytes. Like we have almost all of them, both mainnet and Arbitrum subgraphs, and I think it's 17 terabytes, something like that.
The subgraphs, that's kind of Gnosis blocks, Ethereum blocks, Arbitrum blocks.
Those were deprecated, by the way. I specifically asked Messari to kill those because they weren't using them.
But on Arbitrum they have reappeared. I saw, I guess, Arbitrum blocks subgraph.
Oh, really? Ooh. Okay.
Yes.
Yikes. Oh wow, you're right. Crap. 10,000 GRT signal. Ooh. Okay, I'll chat with them, but I don't think those are Messari subgraphs though. The Arbitrum 1 blocks, that doesn't seem to be in a Messari subgraph.
Yes, those are not Messaris, but still they are painful. Let's put it this way.
Yeah. I don't even think I have it in our database. Well, it was created June 16th, so I might. Well, no, actually, I'm looking at some other stuff.
I know who deployed that one.
June 25. Oh, was it you?
No, but I know who deployed it.
Can you ask them nicely to not do that?
Yeah, I can forward that message.
Yeah, and also those NFTs subgraphs tend to be very heavy, like 7 to 1, those kind of stuff.
Like well, those are actually used though, so and useful as well.
Yes, but still, like obviously you can index like even 1,000 subgraphs, but like 10 subgraphs will bring you tons of pain just with their size. Those blocks subgraphs, ENS subgraphs, no, not ENS, but NFT subgraphs. Yes, we constantly expand disks for them.
Yeah, I will say that from working with a lot of or working with some consumers, typically a lot of the info pages for different dexes, they do use those block subgraphs, and they do that as a way of trying to query what is the volume today, what was the volume 30 days ago, rather than using the end of 30 days ago. They use it to get the exact point 30 days ago, and then they compare those two values just by pinning the query to that specific block. And so it's kind of it's used in a lot of different analytics pages, but most of them, from what I can see, are just querying the SushiSwap hosted service subgraph in order to get that block information.
You know what would be a very nice feature to have for both Postgres and, well, indexers in general? Subgraph deduplication. Say you index a bunch of random insert network here blocks from host to service, but then someone decides to change the QM hash and redeploy it. Deduplication would rather just use the existing data as much as possible without like trying to like rewrite everything from scratch.
I mean, you can get that out of the file system, right, at the end of the day, but it does have quite a high compute cost associated.
Yeah, true.
That's actually something that I wanted to ask about during whenever we have the substreams fireside chat, because substreams by nature are composable, and so like I was looking at building out a chain link substream, and then other people building substreams would be able to just import the substream that I build in order to get chain link token prices or whatever they're building, right? But ideally on the indexer side, it would be fucking rad if we didn't have to resync that information and that modules could just be added on top of each other, just like Lego pieces. And so you sync, NFT information once, and then other people are importing that same module and you're good to go type of thing. I think something like that would just be incredible. Payne, one thing that could be interesting is looking into a way, because I think a lot of the use cases for this is just being able to query, recent block information in order to get a price change over 24 hours or a TVL change over 24 hours or whatever. But if there was some way to auto-deprecate certain state after a time, after a certain time has reached,
there's pruning for subgraphs. We can prune subgraphs.
Prune a subgraph, but even then, it wouldn't prune active state, right? So the block gets created 2 years ago, and even if you prune it, it's going to prune old state from prior than 2 years ago. But it's still considered to be an active state record because the block occurred and it's got a null upper block range. But if they're from the subgraph development side, if we could say, okay, great, as you're syncing this, once you get to block, 3 million, go ahead and start deleting block 1 as you reach 3,000,001, and then you have kind of a rolling period.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, but then you can also do that manually with pruning, right? Just run the command to do it every 10 days. For the last 10 days.
That's only going to kill old state, right? Here, let me give me 1 sec. I'll grab an example.
Okay.
Yeah, you are right in that, Derek. That say, for example, you have an entity, you have a car entity, and you store the car. It has a color blue, and then you change that color to color red. how GraphNode works is that it will store in the PostgreSQL database. It will store first the color, was it blue, and then it will store, and it will also store which block range that color or those values are valid for, and then it will update and store a new entry when that gets updated. So in the case of this car that you changed the color from blue to red, you would have one entry with block range, say from block 1 to 20, that the car was blue, and then from block 21 to and then you might not have an end date. The color was red. And what pruning does is that it prunes the old state. So it would prune that time when the car was blue. But in the case of block numbers, you will store every single block number, and every entry will be the final block number for that or like the final state of that block that you are storing. So there could be ways to try to go and delete those entries and make them fall in under the pruning, but I'm not sure if we would have any performance gains from it, or if that would be just as if that would make the subgraph even tougher to run.
It would help on the query side too, though, which would be more the attraction to consumers, and the attraction to indexers obviously is it's using less storage space. I'm sharing my screen just to finish the example, but yeah, Slim's exactly right. So if you have like inside your database, I just pulled a random token, and you got the block range for when the state changes, right? So maybe the price changed or whatever, total supply changed. And each of these records are each just that one individual token, but it's that token's existence across time. So when you prune, you could say, hey, delete everything that was prior to this block, and then everything below here will get removed. But all of these active state records where you don't have an upper block range, those don't get deleted upon pruning.
Got it. Okay.
So I guess what you could do is create a block number subgraph that is just updating entries, like going through the same entries and just updating, like for example, the last X amount that would constitute like 1 week or something, and then you would go and update it, because if you run pruning on that, you would be you would be able to get the latest, or you would be able to just keep the latest week, but or store remove as well. But then you would need to, every time you store something, you would need to also go and store remove like the oldest entry, and that would make for another piece of mapping code that would need to be run on every single block. So, but yeah, you could just have a running counter, and you would delete one and store one as every time something gets, or a new block gets added to the chain. That would allow the pruning to prune that database.
A separate conversation, and I don't know that this is necessarily an IOH conversation, but it could be just from the indexer community, is there's a lot of applications that integrate other subgraphs, right? Thinking about things like Zapper Finance and some of these guys. And with the concept of migrating subgraphs, some of these people where they don't necessarily have their own subgraph, they're just plugged into a lot of other subgraphs. Getting those folks migrated is going to be a lot more challenging than individual protocols. Because currently, they're plugged into tens or possibly hundreds of subgraphs, and they're not paying for anything on the hosted service, right? Which is a pretty sweet deal for them. But then reaching out to them and being like, hey, now it's time for you guys to start paying, or maybe the protocol starts to fund the API link for the person they're integrating with, right? Those types of things get to be kind of a touchy conversation. I don't know if there's been any discussions around that, or any thoughts of ways that we can help facilitate that transition as indexers. So yeah, just bringing up another topic as well.
That is a good topic to potentially explore. I mean, one would hope that, these subgraphs are providing sufficient value that, and the cost is set such that it's worth it to continue using the subgraphs. But obviously, anything we can do in our power to make it easy in that transition makes a lot of sense. I'm curious to hear other thoughts as well, because this is going to be a very important topic, and going to be it's going to be make or break, I think, as we transition. This and many other things are going to be make or break as we transition to the away from the hosted service.
I would say that goodwill is a finite resource, and the goodwill of the pillar indexers and the like will only last for so long, or as long as they can realistically fund them, which means that we need to find a way to fund more like a public good type delivery of queries, where, like you say, Abel, maybe the subgraph is doing so well that, we can afford to, there's a percentage that you can do for free or whatever. But there's definitely a need to support projects where maybe they don't have any profit to pay for their queries. It's quite possible that they're, and then there'll be charitable stuff as well. I feel like we somehow need to bring the concept of a pillar indexer, or just showing goodwill as an indexer, into the protocol, because apart from reputation, organic reputation, these things are not really considered in the protocol when, query business is meted out by the gateway, or when people think about indexers, all they're really looking at is the APR a lot of the time if they're delegators. But I'd like to see a reputation system that takes into consideration other things that indexers could do, and then maybe somehow finding a way to fund that via the protocol emissions, or, like we have these protocol burns at the moment, for example, for various transactions you do when interacting with the protocol. Maybe we could turn that burn around and use it as a way to fund free queries, up to a certain limit or something along those lines. I don't know, but we definitely need something like that if this is going to be a legitimate product, because not everyone's going to have the money to pay for the queries.
We need to get Yaniv to talk about public goods and everything. How about that for an IOH session?
we can pull some strings. that could it's within the realm of possibility if that's desired from everyone.
I would love to hear Yaniv's thoughts on what Jim's just said.
Yeah, I mean, I'll reach out, see if he's around to potentially join. I mean, I do know he's quite focused on Geo, but it's all interlinked. So I'll try and reach out.
Yeah, I just wanted to add my personal thoughts about it. Well, basically, the graph is a wonderful tool, but the main disadvantage is that it's kind of hard to implement. Obviously, any developer will start with Postgres or with some cloud solutions, basically where they have their stuff computed. And in order to integrate the graph, firstly, we need some kind of easy-to-go tutorials. Obviously, we have those, but we end up with the fact that subgraphs basically are made by each company that needs it. Obviously, Data Nexus does it for other companies, maybe some others do, but mostly everyone makes his own subgraph. And this whole onboarding process of the new consumers of the queries is a very one thing that the graph lacks tremendously. And yeah, the deals like, well, basically in BigQuery, as far as I know, there are some limited number of queries or data consumed is for free, and only then you're getting to start charged. So something like that is good to be implemented. Maybe direct indexer payments will allow to introduce something like that, but I guess that's the road that the protocol should head. And yeah, as I've said, we will gladly support the initiatives like that from our side.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting conversation because there's definitely things that we can do as indexers to help facilitate this move. Perhaps what we can do is maybe have a think about this and potentially bring this up in a future conversation as we're coming up to the end of the hour here. I will have a think about who could be interesting to get involved in this conversation. Obviously, everyone here who's an indexer, but it might be interesting to involve others as well. So yeah, I will go ahead and do that. Carl, yes, because he's been doing a lot of discussions with various projects. So that's a fantastic suggestion there, Jim. Appreciate that. I love the idea of turning some of the protocols. Yes, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense as well. Derek, I think Jim was bang on with that point there. So yeah, I've noted that down as a potential topic to discuss in the future, and I've also noted down Carl as someone who could be a useful person to get involved there. All right, folks, we're at the top of the hour. We're slightly over, but I want to say a special thank you to each and every one of you for coming along and contributing to today's conversation. As always, love these conversations. Like I like they're so fruitful. Like you learn a lot, and I hope that you guys feel the same way as well. And as always, we're going to have these every single week at the same time. Next week we have brainstorming degens. Exactly, that is the best way to describe. Yeah, next week we luckily have Petko, who's going to be coming along from GraphOps to talk a bit about GraphCast. So I'm very much looking forward to that, and various other things that are going to be scheduled in the future as well as continuing these open style discussions, because I do get GRTOps and GRTCast. Indeed, I do get the impression that these conversations, these open style conversations without any topics per se, are super valuable. So we'll definitely keep them going into the future. All right, thank you so much, folks. We'll see you again next time, same time, and wish you all a fantastic week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.